Today we begin week 3 of Great Lent and also our series on habits, our third week of that. 2 weeks ago, we talked about have a plan. Hopefully by this point of Lent, you've made a plan and stuck with it. In case you haven't, there are still 35 days left until Pascha, and creating a new habit takes 30 days. So there is still time to make a plan, stick with it, and come out somehow different at Pascha. Last week, we talked about affirm your faith and how faith is personal, but also lived out in community. We also discussed that faith is an action. I used the example of how just about everyone will affirm that a parachute will slow down a fall, but most of us wouldn't wear one and jump out of an airplane. Faith is what we believe about Christ put into action. Which brings us to this week's topic, which is be a friend. And like the other 2 weeks, this involves action. The gospel lesson today is about friendship. A paralyzed man was carried to Jesus by 4 friends, and Jesus healed him. Let's unpack this a little bit. First, we have the paralyzed man. He is unable to walk, unable to do a lot of things. While the world around him moves fast, his world moves very slow. He has 4 friends who love him unconditionally. This is one characteristic of a true friendship. You accept a friend where he or she is, limitations and all. That doesn't mean we accept every behavior of a friend. Some friends engage in risky behavior. And in that instance, we are supposed to encourage our friends to change what they're doing. But by and large, friends accept friends the way they are. We don't know who came up with the idea of carrying the man to Jesus. It might have been the paralytic who asked his friends to carry him to Jesus. It might have been one of the friends who said, "I've heard of this man Jesus who heals people. We should go see him." Another characteristic of friendship is that it's safe. Friends don't gossip about friends. Friends don't hurt friends. Friends assure friends that they are safe. We don't know from the gospel lesson whether anyone had to convince the paralytic or any of the other friends that going to Jesus was a good idea. Undoubtedly, 5 people didn't come up with the same idea at the same time. That never happens. So there most likely was a discussion which concluded with 5 people being on the same page. This happens in a safe friendship. Ideas are exchanged honestly, there is discussion, debate, and even disagreement until consensus is reached so that friends feel comfortable. Once the decision was made to go to Jesus, there was another obstacle. The crowd was so large around the door that these 5 friends couldn't get anywhere near Jesus. I wrote about today's gospel on the prayer team, and someone sent me a comment very, very early this morning related to the story which I had not thought of before, and I want to share it. And it pertains to the role of the crowd. All of these people wanted to see Jesus. Perhaps they were curious. Perhaps they had already converted to him. Why did none of them move? Why couldn't any of them see that the man needed to get to Jesus to be healed? Kind of makes me think how often we are so concerned about ourselves, even doing good things, that we either don't see or we see and ignore the people in the crowd who might just need something we want more than we need it. The classic example is those who fail to pull over to the side when a fire truck or an ambulance is coming. They are in a hurry or fear losing their place on the road or being a few more minutes late and don't realize that they are stepping aside over life and death. And life and death trumps inconvenience every time. Sometimes we in the crowd need to be a little more conscious of those around us who may have a need that is greater than ours. Once the friends realized they were not going to be able to get to Jesus, they got creative. They figured out how to get the paralytic onto the roof and let him down to Jesus. Imagine the trust involved here. The paralytic might have been afraid of being injured even worse. He totally had to trust his friends. He totally had to cede control to them, which is hard to do, but in a good friendship, it is safe. And then imagine the friends assuring their friend, "Hey, we got you, trust us, we won't let you fall," and then backing it up. Friends keep each other safe. Of course, the ending of the story is that the man was healed by Jesus, and people glorified God as a result, which brings us to some final points. First, it takes friends to help get us to Christ. It is very hard to come to him alone. That is why we belong to a community. That is why we need Christ-centered friendships, where friends will encourage friends to get to Christ. Because at some point, we are all paralyzed, not necessarily by illness, but by fear or doubt or guilt over past sins. When I hear confession, I always assure the person who is going that I'm not sitting in judgment of them, that I'm here as a priest, but also as a friend, to encourage them to come closer to Christ, not judge them for how far they are away from him. We will all be paralyzed at some point by life circumstances. Maybe we are sad or anxious. Maybe we've made a bad decision, or just lost a job or a loved one, just got diagnosed with illness, or been told our job is transferring. There are many circumstances in life where we will feel paralyzed. Good friends will be there for us, to listen, to carry, and to just care. Good friends also see a friend who is in trouble and rush to him or her. Good friends know when to speak and also know when to stay silent and just be there. Jesus called his disciples his friends. That's right, Jesus wants a friendship with us. We are not his servants, his subjects, or his slaves. We are his friends. We all need to take a turn carrying our friends when they are paralyzed and allowing them to carry us when we are paralyzed. Hopefully you have 4 friends who carry you, and hopefully you help carry at least 4 other people. And hopefully when you feel paralyzed, the first place you go is Christ, to ask him for help in carrying you. Hopefully we rely on him, trust him, confide in him the same way we would with our friends. Hopefully we even run to him with good news and not just bad news, because friends aren't just there in the bad times, but in the good ones as well. We intentionally carve out time for our friends, and hopefully we do the same for Christ. In the Divine Liturgy, we say, "For you are a good and loving God." In Greek, it is "Oti agathos ke philanthropos theos hyparchis," which has that word philanthropos, so it literally translates, "For you are a good and friend of man, God." Again, what better way of seeing Christ than as a friend? Which is why his experience of being fully man is so important, because he had friends and was a good friend, and thus can see us as his friends, and we can see him as our friend. Let's focus on being better friends this week. Here's something you can do, suggestion. Reach out to your 4 closest friends via text or phone call, and tell them about the gospel lesson, that a paralyzed man was carried by 4 friends, and thank them for carrying you, and reaffirm your willingness to carry them. Now, on the subject of friendship, we also have seats in the crowd, and there are paralyzed people all around us, whom we do not know. Sometimes charity doesn't involve carrying someone, but just giving up a space for them to get through. International Orthodox Christian Charities, IOCC, provides disaster relief all over the world to people paralyzed by all kinds of things, including now efforts to send humanitarian aid to Ukraine, where people are paralyzed not only by fear, but by lack of basics, food, water, and shelter. IOCC is our charity of choice here at St. John's when it comes to disaster relief. We send them thousands of dollars every year as part of our charitable giving in our budget, which comes from your stewardship. We recently sent a donation for Ukraine relief. Lou Zagami is the development director for IOCC and happens to be visiting our parish today. And I'd like Lou to offer us a few words about IOCC and how our donations are helping to bring Christ and to bring relief to those who are paralyzed. So just give him a few minutes of your time here. Let me turn this on. Stick that whatever.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me in the back? Raise your hand. There we go. It's a blessing to be here for so many different reasons. I want to first thank His Eminence Metropolitan Alexios for his blessing to visit his parishes in his metropolis, and especially for Father Stavros, who I've known. I first met him, it was 27 years ago, I think, 1995. My wife and I helped form a new Greek Orthodox parish up in Massachusetts, and Father was a deacon at that time. I think we were both 20 years old, maybe, and he was there in the opening of the doors, which is a beautiful sacrament and ceremony, as you know. So we go back quite a bit. And also, when I met with Father a couple of years ago, he introduced me to his prayer team. So I actually get his reflections every day, so I guess I'm part of the prayer team as well. I find them very beautiful and fulfilling. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. I love the theme, to be a friend. It's very powerful, and I think that kind of encompasses what IOCC does. I know most of you are aware of what we're doing, but my goal today is to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and hopefully you'll hear something different, maybe some more specifics. And of course, I'll be available during coffee hour, and I know coffee is on your mind now, so I hope I won't be too long. To answer some questions about this beautiful life-saving ministry. It's been 30 years. Amazingly, we started in 1992. Father mentioned Ukraine already. This isn't the first time we've responded, to the effects of a war. It's a little bit sadder this time because it's Orthodox killing Orthodox, as you know. It's just part of the fallen world that we're in, and we just have to deal with it and be there to serve those that are suffering because of this. Ethiopia, same thing, Orthodox killing Orthodox. They've been in a civil war now for a few years. And then, of course, Syria, 12 years ago, 12 million people displaced there. And then, of course, the Bosnian, after Yugoslavia fell back in the 90s, again, Orthodox against Orthodox. So it's very, very sad. But on a good note, we've been there responding to them. Ironically, our first response back in 1992, it was a grassroots effort. When communism fell in Russia, the people were starving, they needed clothing, there was no longer a state at the time, and this grassroots effort put together a drive to send over container loads of food and medicine, and I think it was about a $4 million effort at the time. And then it was at that point where the church realized that we really needed to have a professional organization that does this full time. And that's so be. And by the grace of God, over the last 30 years, from that $4 million, we've now distributed over $760 million worldwide to 60 countries. We are the church. When Father says to be a friend, what is the church supposed to be, other than a friend to the community, right? It's about evangelization. It's about bringing the joy of our Christianity to those. And what better way to do it? The other word I heard Father mention was tangible. It's a very tangible way of doing this. We don't proselytize. We don't evangelize directly, say, as OCMC does. But through this work, through this love, through this distribution of aid, we spread the word of God in a non-direct way. But they know, we always have the cross on our emblem. They know that we're part of International Orthodox Christian Charities. And the other important thing to understand is that the first phone call that we make, and 90% of the time when we do our work, it's really doing it through the Orthodox Church, wherever that is in the world, whether it's in Houston, Texas, or Ethiopia. Our main mission is to build up the capacity of our church to share this friendship through the people throughout the world. We're not going to stay there forever. We're going to do what we have to do and hopefully set it up so that they're self-sustained once they leave. But we will stay in those countries as long as we're needed. So we're still in Serbia, which we've been in the 90s, Bosnia, so we still have an office there. We have an office in Athens, Greece. We still have offices in Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. We have our office in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where we coordinate all of our work in sub-Saharan Africa. We've built schools in Uganda. Ethiopia right now, our focus is dealing with a hideous condition called podoconiosis. If you don't know anything about that, it's a disease simply caused by walking on a certain soil, which is volcanic in nature. There's a certain type of, like a silica, like a glass substance in the soil, and when the farmers and the villagers walk with bare feet for a number of years, it penetrates into the skin, and it affects their immune system, and it looks like they have elephantitis, if you've ever seen that. The legs and the ankles and the feet swell up that you can't even recognize the toes. It's that severe. But fortunately, with proper hygiene and treatment, it will dissipate in most cases. So we've been doing that for the last 5 years. We still believe there's at least 1 million people that are affected. Every program that we have is different. We have a very experienced program staff, field officers, who will assess the situation on the ground. And what we try to do is we find out, first of all, what is the need, what is it that everyone else isn't doing, and how can we plug in? What funds do we have, either through grant money or what we call GIK, gifted materials, can we get in there so that we can leverage your dollars? You know, we always remind people that 91 to 92 cents of every dollar goes to the people that we serve. But as important as that, for every dollar that we get, we usually distribute about $7 worth of aid. So if you donate $100, you can figure out, that you'll get $700 worth of aid distributed. That's on average. Sometimes it's much, much more. Sometimes it's less. We hit all the different sectors: emergency preparedness, health, food security, agriculture. I mean, I could go on for 7 hours about the different kinds of projects that we have. I only invite you to visit our website, and you can actually see it by country. We currently, in Greece, let's mention just 3 places. I'd like to talk a little bit about Greece, Ukraine, and then the United States. I'll finish with that. Greece, we've been there since 2007 when you had fires there. This past summer on the island of Evia in Attica, as you know, there were terrible fires there as well. It completely ruined the resin industry there. If you know anything about resin, it's a byproduct of wood. When the trees burnt down, they lost that whole industry. They make turpentine and that sort of thing. We're offering feed to the animals where the farmers lost the vegetation through the fires. And we're going to have an ongoing program there for many years. We just, by the grace of God, got a beautiful grant from one of our larger donors, the George and Judy Marcus Foundation. They're out of California, offered $300,000 as a match. So for every dollar that you give, they're going to match that up to $300,000. And we also have $85,000 from the Jaharis Foundation, who many of you know, Memory Eternal, which will go toward that area of Greece to help them get back on their feet. But since the financial crisis, we've probably distributed over $35 million worth of aid. In medical supplies, we helped a lot of these young adults, and they're still suffering, by the way, as many of you know. The unemployment is still at 50% between the ages of 25 and 30, you know, in that young age. They're still suffering there. Many of the young adults had to leave the city and go back to the villages, and they wanted to get back into the farming that the family did for generations. And we helped them set up co-ops. We got them equipment to do the work, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So always trying to do it in a way where the survivor will be self-sustained after we leave. Ukraine, it's going to be a multi-phase. This is obviously a very fluid situation. When the war started, 3 weeks ago, we enacted our emergency response team. We have people over there already, like as I said, in Serbia and such, and we sent them there to start assess the situation and to start contacting all of our church and ecclesiastical partners to see what we can do. So it'll be a multi-phased operation. So far, we'll be sending baby supplies, including diapers, bottles, and wipers, emergency food and water. We're going to be sending over generators, flashlight batteries, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, that's going to change. In the last couple of weeks, I've been in touch with HEPA for all the HEPANs here, and the Peon Credence Association has been very supportive over the years, and we're hoping to get some money to help us ship medical containers with the medical supplies. It's an incredible program that we have mobilized for $21,000. If we get a donation, as an example, from Philoptochos or say a HEPA, we're able to work with one of our partners, and they send over a full container of medical supplies. That container can have a value of anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million for that $21,000. As you can see, it's just a tremendous opportunity. And we did find out that there is a way of logistically getting the containers in, which is not always the case. So that's going to be part of our next phase. We're currently working in Romania, Poland. We will probably be sending goods into Ukraine. We haven't as of yet. We still have to figure out all the logistics of that, which, as you can imagine, during the war is not an easy thing. But we will be there for them in some form or another. And then I'd like to end on the topic of the U.S. program, because we have a very special U.S. program, and it's a multi-phase program in that the first thing that we're trying to do is having conversations with all of the Orthodox churches throughout the United States. And for them to kind of take a look at themselves, to do an assessment and say, how is it that this community could respond and support a recovery group after an event, whether it's an active shooter, a hurricane, or a tornado, whatever the event might be. And there are many different suggestions that we have. So the first thing is to have those conversations so that once or when the hurricane approaches, we're not making phone calls to people that we haven't talked to already. They'll already know what we can do, we'll already know what they can do, and it just makes things a lot more efficient. The second thing we do after the actual event, or maybe just before in the case of a hurricane when we know that it's coming, we have a group of 150 individuals, I happen to be one of them, who are trained to give emotional and spiritual care. I'd probably say 50%, maybe 60% are actually Orthodox clergy, but the rest are lay people who have come from counseling backgrounds. Some of them are retired doctors. And we will then deploy into the area to give emotional and spiritual care. Not only to the survivors, but to the first responders as well. Because as you can imagine, 4 or 5 days later, they're exhausted. In many cases, a police officer might be deployed and his family's home in a flooded home. This happened, I remember, down in Houston after Hurricane Harvey, and they're stressed out beyond measure as well. So everybody needs that helping hand, and that word, a friend, comes to mind, because that's 90% of what we do as frontliners, is to just be there as a presence, a loving presence, just for a while, just to let them know that someone cares. And it's a very powerful thing to see. I was deployed to Louisiana after Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Ida was interesting because it happened to land on the 16th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. So all the news media showed up, and they were kind of looking for the same kind of a disaster that Katrina offered, and it really wasn't. It was a different kind. It wasn't the flooding that they had back at Katrina. This was more of a wind event. So many of the media, and this happens unfortunately, they disappear after about a week or two. And they kind of leave everyone behind. We happen to be the only 2 organizations that are actually serving St. Charles Parish right now. When I first landed there, it was amazing, because when you looked out the window, you could see like a checkerboard of all these blue tarps on top of the homes. And my first reaction was, well, hopefully maybe it wasn't that bad, because I didn't see the houses' roofs blown off, but they were all blue tarps. But this was a special storm, and try to imagine this if any of you, and I'm assuming you have, living in Florida, have experienced a hurricane. They had 150 mile an hour sustained winds for a minimum of 2 hours. Sustained, in other words, non-stop winds. It literally vaporized, one person explained to me, it might be an exaggeration, but it vaporized the raindrops as it was coming down. It was so strong. But what happened was, is the shingles were the first to go, and now the house was completely exposed. Every square inch of those homes was soaking wet. The people had to leave, and of course, in the South, what happens, you then have mold. So anything that was organic is completely destroyed. So that's our second part of our response, where we organize people to come in, volunteers like yourself, who will come out, and it's a very dirty job. We have team leaders who will be there to guide you, and we do what we call muck-outs. And a muck-out is when you come in and you have to literally remove the furniture, the paperwork, everything out of the home and throw it out on the street. Then you have to remove literally, like I said, anything organic. That includes the floors, the walls, insulation, cabinets, everything has to go out into the street. Nothing is saved unless it's made of metal. So the sad part of that is that the people lose everything. We try to put pictures aside, or maybe some tax papers, we suggest that they take pictures of them and that sort of thing. But it's a very, very sad thing. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize, and you should be aware of if you're not already, is that our government can only do so much if your home is destroyed. If you don't have the capacity to buy insurance, maybe you just don't have the money, right? FEMA, the maximum that you're going to get out of FEMA is maybe $35,000, even if you lose your own home, the whole home. And $35,000 in 2022 doesn't build you anything, as you can imagine. There are still people in Houston, Texas, after Hurricane Harvey, which was either 2017 or 18, who are still living in homes where they're sleeping and they can still see the studs on the wall because they never got the funds, or they don't have enough money to build the walls again. And this is where IOCC and organizations like this come in, because the next phase that we do is we will go back and we'll partner up with Habitat Humanity and others like that. And you, again, if you haven't, maybe some of you have come on one of our builds, where you can come down and spend a week with other Orthodox Christians and rebuild people's homes. We get the materials donated. We look for grants. I know we just applied for a grant from the United Way up in Louisiana to be there for the whole summer. So there's a very powerful and wonderful opportunity for you as a community, or we as Orthodox, to go in and help these people kind of rebuild their lives. And it's very, very hard to see. I'll just tell you one story, and then I'll end. I met a gentleman who, this was a hard one. Most of the homes that we were working in were really broken down. You could tell that they were very poor. But this one house we went into, you could tell it was brand new. You could tell by the trimming along the, between the ceiling and the walls. It was really nicely done. And this guy had 3 kids, and he had built this home with his dad. And his dad had just passed away about 2 weeks before the hurricane hit. And the loss, you could just feel it, you could just see it, that not only did he lose his home, but the memory of what he did with his dad. It was just very, very sad. But he was so grateful that we were there to help him out, to just give him that. I can't tell you that gift of giving which you would receive if you do decide to do something like that. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're doing. So I ask you if your parish has been very grateful. Father Stavros is on board. We thank you for all of your past donations. But I do ask you as individuals, it's a time of Lent, and during Lent we worship, we fast, but it's all about almsgiving, right? And if we're not doing all those 3, then you may as well just have a steak every night, because that's what fasting is all about, is really preparing you to worship properly and to think of those that are in need throughout the world. Christ's message throughout the Gospels all year long is about giving his mercy to those that are in need. And that's how we have to perform as Orthodox Christians. Please check out our website, donate, even add us to your stewardship, even if it's $10 a month. At least get on our mailing list, our email list, so that you can at least see the work that we're doing. The transparency of how we work is important. The effectiveness of how we work. We have a very good reputation. I don't say that in a form of pride. It's just that we work very, very hard. I saw there's a person on the parish council by the name of Trianda Filu. I don't know if you're related to our executive director, Dean, but I'd love to meet you if you happen to be here today. So please keep us in mind and keep not only our staff, but all those that are suffering throughout the world in your prayers this Lent. Thank you.